On this edition of Paint Your Engine, let's have a go at one of the long-lost American icons, a New York Central Hudson in streamlined form. Now, all of my previous paintings have been done using watercolour paper, but on this occasion I've taken the plunge to a full canvas board. You can get these from Poundland for £1 a pop, A4 sized, or £2 a pop, A3 sized, so as canvas boards go, they're cheap enough. And although I normally use acrylics, I'm going to try out a cheap set of Bold Mio watercolours, which were on offer from The Works, which to those of you from overseas is an arts and crafts retail outlet with hundreds of stores in the UK. So let's see if this cheap stuff equates to rubbish or not. The New York Central Railroad Hudson 464 is arguably one of the most iconic American steam locomotive designs not to be represented in preservation. Well, sort of, we'll get to that. It all stems back to 1927, when they built their first 464, known as the J1, designed by the railroad's chief engineer, Paul Kiefer. And over the next 11 years, the NYC built 275 of them, with more variations than the range of streaming services on the internet. Seriously, there was the J1, J1 Type A, J1 Type B, J1 Type D, J1 Type C, J1 Type E with thermic siphons, J1 with Walschaerts valve gear, J1 Type E without thermic siphons but with more boiler pressure. It's about as confusing as a word that'll get me demonetized. The thing is though, the majority of NYC Hudsons had a lot of similarities. They all had a booster, which is basically a little 2-cylinder engine hidden in the rear bogie. Most of them had Baker valve gear instead of Walschaerts. They all had 6'7" driving wheels, and they could all handle about 18 fully loaded passenger cars at speeds of up to 110 miles an hour, allegedly, while their predecessors, the K-Class Pacifics, could manage about 12 coaches and wouldn't even reach the ton. There's no denying the Hudson design, named after the nearby Hudson River, became a trendsetter for railroads across the US. It was copied for the Boston and Albany Railroad, with 6'3" driving wheels, smaller tenders, and another 5,400 pounds of tractive effort. It was one step before the Northern 484 was designed, and one of the J1Es, number 5344, even became America's first streamlined steam locomotive. In 1938, the final 10 were built, known as the J3A Dreyfus class, after James Dreyfus, who was credited for streamlining the NYC's 20th Century Limited service. Though part of me wonders how much he was responsible for it, and how much his design and engineering teams were responsible for it. After all, as we've learned from Henry Fowler on the LMS, draftsmen normally do the design work, while history credits their superiors. Contrary to their immortalization in popular culture, the Hudsons were mostly built without streamlining. But as cars and planes began to challenge trains and Art Deco became the fashion movement of the 30s, the railroads had to jump on the bandwagon. So between 1934 and 39, 13 of the J's received such streamlining. 11 of them, including the 10 Dreyfuses, had what looked like a vertical fin across the nose of the engine. I won't paint it here, but it almost made the engine look like something from outer space. The other two had a slightly more conventional, if you can call it that, bullet nose over the smokebox with two-tone grey colours for the Empire State Express service. Unfortunately, when the J's began to receive streamlining, dieselization was already creeping its way into the railroad industry. The Union Pacific and Chicago, Burlington and Quincy railroads were already touring streamlined diesel prototypes when number 5344, now named Commodore Vanderbilt, was being promoted. The New York Central was famously billed as the road to the future, and this was simply a time when diesel, believe it or not, was the future. It's amazing how times change, isn't it? If diesel was the future today, everyone would riot. The Hudsons were displaced initially by Niagara 484s before the New York Central veered towards dieselization. This led to the 464s still working on passenger trains, but not on the frontline passenger services they were built for. And by 1957, all of the New York Central's iconic J-Class 464s had been withdrawn. Destination: scrap. As for today, there's half of J1 number 5313 surviving in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but it's the tender half. So the iconic part of the engine only lives on in pop culture, be it on posters, album covers, bits of animation, that song by James Coffey if that's how you interpret it, and so on. So the cheap canvas board and the Boldmere watercolours seem to be working fine, but I don't know. I think I've messed up and it looks more like Norfolk and Western number 611, but I don't know. You be the judge. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed painting it. If you like what you see and you'd like to see more, then please feel free to like, share, subscribe, discuss, contribute to Steam Locos in Profile on Patreon, and why not have a go yourself? Why not paint your engine?